Hey, it's Aaron. And today I have a pretty good question that's been asked by, I don't even know how to say this name. Starts with a J. Anyway, I'm not going to butcher your name. I'm just going to say, hi, Jay. I'll call you that. Uh, anyway, it's in reference to a recent kind of slurry of little news items about how the national park is enforcing four-wheel drive requirements on its trails and is now aggressively issuing fines to those who ignore uh, those posts, or anyway, those who ignore that rule. So the question is actually, what's the difference between four-wheel drive and all-wheel drive? And it's a good question because in a lot of places like Europe, the terms are basically interchangeable. They don't really make a designation to differentiate them. But here in the US, in North America, and in some other parts of the world, I believe Australia does this as well, there is a marked difference between the two types of drivetrain. So both of them run all four wheels, so they send power to all four wheels. It's a question of how they do it. So in an all-wheel drive vehicle, you have what's called a differential. It's a little gearbox. So when the power comes out of the engine, it goes to that, and then that sends it to the front and the rear axle, and it can be clutched. It can be turned on and off, and it can vary how much power is sent forward or backward. And all-wheel drive only has the one gear ratio. So it does not have the ability to do like a low gear for when you really need a lot of torque, but you don't need speed. So you're crawling through something, climbing over something, that kind of thing. All-wheel drive is great in a lot of situations. It's really good for bad weather. It's probably the best option for bad weather. It's really good for slick and questionable roadways. It's good for dirt, like going on a dirt road, going into dirt parking lots, dirt areas. And then if your vehicle has ground clearance, it can do dirt trails up to a point. So it's good for a lot of things, and there's a reason that it's the most common powertrain now. It's much more common than true four-wheel drive on vehicles today. Now, four-wheel drive is different. Four-wheel drive has what's called a transfer case. You can think of that as a second transmission. So it's a second transmission, usually added to the original, generally behind it. So you have the transmission that's actually sending power to the wheels, and then you have the transfer case, which takes some of that power and sends it to the other set of wheels. So the transfer case's biggest strength is the fact that it has low gearing and it has tight gearing. They're very, very strong gears in there. They're made for delivering power, delivering torque, and they are a four-wheel drive vehicle cannot change the amount of power it's sending to one axle or the other. So if a transfer case is engaged, you're sending 50% of the power to the front and 50% to the rear. There is no variance to that unless it's been geared differently, but that almost never happens. So and then you usually have a high and a low range. High range you can think of as all-wheel drive because it basically is powering both axles, so you have all four wheels turning. It does not vary how much is happening to each, still a 50-50 split, but you can go at high speeds, low speeds, whatever you want using that. Low gearing is different. Low gearing multiplies torque a bunch. So in a Jeep, it can be as much as 1 to 72 at the wheel. So if you have 1 unit of power, you can think of it as 1 M&M. How's that? So you have 1 M&M. That is being multiplied through that transmission and transfer case to 72 M&Ms when the wheel turns. That's a lot of power difference. You cannot do that with all-wheel drive. You can do it, not that much, but you definitely can do it with four-wheel drive. Four-wheel drive is most common in body-on-frame vehicles, so truck-based vehicles. Those are vehicles that have a frame that the body sits on instead of a unibody vehicle, which is what most people drive. And that's a vehicle where the body and the frame are one unit. They work together, hence the unibody. Those are things like your cars, sedans, small SUVs, and so on. Once you get to a vehicle that has a high ground clearance and a lot of towing and hauling capability, so big SUVs, pickup trucks, and so on, then you're talking probably about a body-on-frame vehicle. They tend to have a lot of ground clearance comparatively, and they tend to be top-heavy, but there's because of that design. So you have all-wheel drive, which is turning all four wheels and is generally made for light duty dirt and bad weather. That's pretty much what they're tuned for. And then you go to four-wheel drive, which is really made for power delivery, for harsh conditions, deep trails, heavy trails, mud, all that kind of stuff. So if you go to like Moab and you watch people climbing rocks, that's four-wheel drive. You go to a rally race where the cars are running at very high speed and they're going on dirt and pavement and they're sliding all over the place, that's all-wheel drive. So that's the major differences. Hopefully this explained it. I know it was kind of a complicated answer, but it's a good question. So as far as the Park Service is concerned, so the National Park Service, just really quick on that, they have some trails. They usually call them Jeep trails. That's kind of the vernacular for them. These are trails that are four-wheel drive only. They require four-wheel drive. And what happens is some of these are traversable sometimes by vehicles like Subarus and small Toyotas that don't have four-wheel drive. They have all-wheel drive. That's fine. The problem is that sometimes they're not traversable by those, and those vehicles get stuck and cause problems. And so the Park Service is actively now enforcing that four-wheel drive only requirement on those particular roads and trails. That's why this came up in the news, and that's why the question happened. So there you go. That's all I got. This has been Aaron. Talk to you again soon.